The white light from the ceiling panels poured across the glass conference table, cold enough for me to see my own reflection, calm, expressionless, but beginning to crack. The Neurotech logo glowed blue at the end of the room, turning slowly on the LED screen behind CEO Daniel Cross. He stood tall, voice steady, not a single tremor in it. Effective immediately, Dr. Rivers. Your position is terminated. The sound cut through the air like a blade. No one moved. People kept holding their pens, hands trembling slightly, as if pretending to take notes would somehow keep them safe from this moment. I looked around. 14 faces, all of whom had once sent congratulatory emails when I became chief neural architect. Now, not one dared meet my eyes. Only one pair did. Daniel's. Cold, measuring, calculating. He didn't need to say more. I knew this wasn't a decision made overnight. It was an execution, carefully planned. It's not personal, he said, smooth as a rehearsed line. Just efficiency. Efficiency. Such a clean word to hide the filth of office politics. I set my pen down, closed the file in front of me, and rose. The chair scraped softly, a small sound, but in that oxygen-starved room, it felt like the last breath before silence took over. No one said a thing. No one dared. Every sentence uttered now would be trimmed, edited, and turned against me in a few hours when corporate comms sent the internal announcement. I turned toward Daniel. He was already looking down, pretending to sign papers, as if this were too trivial to merit one final glance. I didn't give him that luxury. I simply said, "Good luck, Daniel." A small line, barely above a whisper, but it froze the entire room for one more beat. A director in the corner inhaled sharply. Daniel looked up, a flicker of surprise flashing before the mask returned, a perfect portrait of composure forged through hundreds of power meetings. I walked out. No one stood. No one said goodbye. Only the click of my heels echoed across the marble floor, bouncing off the walls thick with silence. As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Daniel through the narrowing gap, his hands gripping the table, veins raised, as if he wasn't sure he'd done the right thing. The elevator descended slowly. I stared at my reflection in the steel panel. The woman looking back wasn't the same. White blouse, hair tied neatly, eyes steady, not defeated, just calculating. Ground floor. The doors opened. Cold air swept in from the glass lobby doors, carrying the scent of salt and exhaust. Outside, San Francisco's sky was dull gray, the skyline glittering with the sterile shine of tech power, concrete and silicon monuments I had helped build. Now they looked down on me, silent and unfamiliar. I walked through the lobby. The receptionist gave a polite, strained smile, avoiding my gaze. Behind her, my name was already gone from the digital directory. Quick work. Outside, the wind grew stronger. I pulled my coat tighter, looking up toward the top floor, Daniel's floor, where he probably stood between glass walls, convinced he'd just cleaned up a mess. A mess. The word lingered, and the corner of my mouth lifted. If only he knew what I knew, he wouldn't sleep tonight. A self-driving car rolled up. I stepped in, the facial scanner humming softly. The screen lit up with familiar text. "Welcome, Dr. Rivers. Destination?" I hesitated for a second, then murmured, "Home." The car glided along the coast, city lights slicing through the glass window, dividing my reflection into two halves, one from the past, one already forming something new. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. There was only one sound left, the steady beat of my heart. I'd spent too many years inside systems and neural models to know this truth. Every rash reaction gets recorded, analyzed, and used against you. I leaned back, eyes on the horizon, where the last trace of sunset was fading away. In the dark, my own voice echoed softly again. "Good luck, Daniel." No one in that room knew that a polite farewell wasn't an ending. It was a trigger, a warning. And 14 days from now, it would become a verdict for everyone who thought they could buy the soul of science. I stayed quiet for a long time, watching the city lights smear across the car window. San Francisco was still awake, breathing steady like a beast sleeping under a neon blanket. Where are you right now, hearing this story? Maybe stuck in morning traffic, coffee in hand, caught between meetings and deadlines. Or maybe sitting somewhere quiet in Chicago, New York, Seattle, watching your own city glow with that same cold light I see now. Wherever you are, you've probably had a moment like mine, when the world suddenly goes still and everything you once believed collapses in a single sentence. Maybe it was a meeting, an email, someone saying, "It's not personal." But you knew better. It's always personal. I smiled faintly at the thought. Outside, the city lights stream past like flowing data. 14 days from now, everything would shift. And when it does, you'll understand why I didn't tremble when I said, "Good luck, Daniel." That night, the apartment grew so quiet I could hear every drop of rain hitting the window pane. No phone calls, no messages. No one asked if I was okay. Only the faint light from the kitchen spilling across the wall, over the photos, Lila smiling, the two of us bent over an old computer, her caught mid-song in a bathroom mirror. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. In front of me lay an old watch, face down, its second hand ticking. Lila's watch, the one she used to time her study breaks. Each tick was a heartbeat, reminding me that time never moves backward. Lila was 6 years younger. She was laughter, energy, the softness that broke through my rigid nights. I was the serious one, disciplined with work and deadlines, while she was chaos wrapped in warmth, singing nonsense, teasing me, cooking half burned meals when I forgot to eat. At 19, she was diagnosed with a progressive neurological disorder, a disease that slowly destroyed motor control and then, eventually, breath itself. No cure, only a fragile hope in an experimental AI assisted synapse restoration therapy. Still in trial at a private lab in Chicago. The cost for the first round, roughly $1.4 million. We didn't have it. My parents had already mortgaged the house. I was still a research student living off scholarships and instant noodles. I'll never forget the doctor handing us the cost sheet, face calm, as if he were offering a job proposal. And Lila, she just smiled softly. "Come on, I don't want to be bought back at the price of a penthouse." The words floated like air, but underneath was fear, the kind she hid with jokes. At night, I knew she curled under her blanket, crying soundlessly when her fingers no longer obeyed her. I once tried to breach the lab's internal data network, desperate to find access to their treatment files, anything that might help for free. I sent petitions to public medical funds, nonprofits, and even posted a 3,000-word plea on Medium. No one replied. No one heard that fragile breath. Lila died at 22. Her death was as quiet as her life. No headlines, no noise. But inside me, she left a black hole no award or patent could ever fill. From that moment, I swore, if technology ever lies in my hands, it will not be something the rich can buy. It will be a tool to save lives, without conditions. I pulled myself back from the memory and looked again at the old watch. I turned it gently, reading the words burned on the back. To Ellie, from the Better Genius. Lila. Part of me wanted to throw everything away, to stop, to vanish into silence. But the thought of Lila and of others like her pulled me back. The ones who once sat in hospital beds staring at a medical bill like it was a death sentence. Neural recode isn't just an algorithm or a neural model. It's a second chance for those who never had a first one. I once made a promise in the dark. I won't let it be locked away in a corporate vault. I stood up and pulled a document case from under the bed. Hundreds of pages of notes, data models, meeting transcripts, side agreements, trial invoices. I flipped through them until I found the master contract I'd signed with Neurotech in 2022. Section 14, Section 22, and finally, Section 31.6. Reversion Clause. In the event of leadership change, early project termination, or ethical conflict, primary architectural licensing shall revert to the original architect through the previously filed holding entity. My chest tightened. That was the clause I had written quietly, almost unconsciously, when I sensed the company drifting away from its original purpose. Holding entity. It was Alaris Biosystems, the company I had formed solely to hold intellectual property. It had no business activity, hidden deep in the California S1 filings. No one noticed, no one asked. I had prepared. Not for revenge, for justice, if I were ever cut out of the dream I built. Outside, the rain kept falling. I opened my laptop, entered the two-factor codes, and logged into the federal patent system. The line appeared: Patent Nunch NR017B. Ownership: Alaris Biosystems Inc. Filed by Dr. Elena Rivers. Status: active, valid, exclusive. I stared at the screen. I felt no glee, no triumph, only the weight of responsibility. And in that stillness, I could almost hear Lila whisper, "Your turn to keep the promise." The apartment stayed silent. The rain kept falling, but something inside me began to burn again. I knew my responsibility had begun, and that this time, technology would live under the rule of justice I intended to protect. 3 weeks before the day I walked out of Neurotech in silence, the first signs of the storm had already appeared. It was a Monday morning, clear sky, sunlight spilling through the glass walls of the 47th floor, where we gathered for the first strategic meeting of the quarter. Me, Daniel, a few product and marketing directors, and a representative from the board. Everyone knew Neural Recode was at a turning point. After 4 years of research, the first clinical trials had succeeded. The question was no longer if it could work, but what we were going to do with it. Daniel turned on the projector. The first slide appeared: Monetization Roadmap, NR Platform 2.0. I felt it right then. A warning. He spoke smoothly, confidently, with that investor-friendly tone he'd perfected. We're holding a neurotechnology platform capable of reshaping modern medicine, but breakthroughs don't sustain themselves. We need a solid business model. Partnering with private medical conglomerates is the first step. Next comes the defense sector. Defense? I looked around. Some faces nodded, others froze mid-expression. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "You mean applying neural recode for military use?" Daniel smiled as if I'd asked something obvious. We're not making weapons. We're helping soldiers recover neural function, enhancing reflexes and reducing PTSD. It's support, not interference. I stared at slide 3, Defense Partnerships, Project Horizon. The code name for a $300 million deal Daniel had been quietly negotiating with the Pentagon. I couldn't stay quiet. You're selling a technology built to save lives for combat use? Lila died because she couldn't afford therapy like this, Daniel. And you want to turn it into a luxury product for the wealthy and the military? The room froze. Daniel's hand stopped mid-click. His eyes locked on mine, no trace of the CEO's smile left. In that moment, I saw it, the look of someone who feels threatened. I spoke again, slowly. If Neurotech goes down that path, I can't be part of it. No one replied. The meeting ended in an uneasy silence, not agreement, but fear. That night, I stayed late at the office. As I walked past Daniel's glass office, I saw the light still on. He stood by the window, looking out over the city. I was about to leave when I heard his voice, quiet, almost tired. "Elena, I really don't want this to turn into a fight." I stopped at the doorway. "Then don't make it one." He turned around. There was exhaustion in his eyes. "The board wants results. We need money to keep the labs running. Do you think I don't care about people? I just don't have the luxury of being an angel, Elena." I didn't answer, because that was the difference between us. He believed power came from compromise. I believe that there are things you don't bargain away, even if the price is your career. A few days later, the slow shutdown began. My system access was reduced, emails restricted, documents locked. My name disappeared from the technical meeting invites. I knew what was coming, and Daniel didn't make me wait long. That Friday morning, I received an email labeled Urgent with the subject line, Confidential Review, Project Ethics Breach. I understood. It was the legal pretext to make my dismissal compliant. In that meeting, Daniel sat at the head of the table beside the head of legal. He said there was evidence that I had backed up research data onto a personal device without following the company's security procedures. I objected. Those were drafts I had written the year before the new policies even existed. Daniel cut me off. This isn't criminal, Elena. We're simply reviewing ethical and governance compliance. I knew then it was over. He had prepared everything, enough to make the board safe from lawsuits, enough to make my exit look voluntary. But he'd miscalculated one thing. I hadn't backed up the company data. I had built an external legal and licensing framework, lawful, approved, and fully documented, waiting for a moment exactly like this to activate ownership reversion. As Daniel signed the termination papers, he believed he was closing the final door on the Elena problem. In reality, he had just opened a new one, a door he would never be able to close. That night, Daniel stood before the mirror in his office, suit still neat but his tie loosened. He looked at his reflection, not to fix his hair, but as if trying to decide whether he was still a good man. Then he picked up the phone, called his contact at the Department of Defense, and said quietly, "The plan proceeds as scheduled. Neural Recode will launch on time. We've handled the internal issue." The city kept breathing as if nothing had happened. San Francisco at night had no heart for the scientist who had been pushed out of the company she had built. I returned to my small mission apartment, the place I had long called my refuge, a space with no meeting rooms, no deadlines, no Daniel Cross. Tonight, it did not feel like refuge. It felt like the place to inventory what remained after that cold purge. I turned on the desk lamp. Warm light washed the walls and fell across stacks of folders, pages wrinkled from old cups of tea. They were the relics of long nights when my team and I rewrote every line of code for Neural Recode. Back then, I never imagined I would be cut out of the dream I had built. I opened my laptop. There were no emails from Neurotech, no messages, no check-ins. All contacts severed, clean and fast, like a snippet of code deleted from a repository. I checked an old Slack channel where the engineers shared updates, memes, and reminders to drink water. My status removed, isolated, quiet, the price of not bending. Even though I had steeled myself, the moment still hurt in the most human way. I poured a glass of wine, not to forget, but to calm the heat rising in my chest, the indignation long suppressed. It was not violent or loud. It was a slow heat, like metal warming in a kiln, spreading from sternum to fingertips. I knew Daniel expected me to be silent, that I was a scientist, not a fighter, that I had no board, no PR team, no war chest to strike back. He was right about one thing. I did not have those things. But I had what he had, underestimated the most, preparation. I pulled the document box from under my desk, the box that had lain there for 2 years since I first worried the company was straying. I opened it. Inside were meeting minutes, email threads about neural recode direction, initial expense invoices, and most importantly, the full legal files for Ilaris Biosystems. I had quietly formed that company not to disappear, but to preserve the ethical core of the technology I knew would be manipulated. I turned to the yellowed patent packet for NR017B. The last page bore my signature, the federal seal, and a note, patent validity clause, independent of employer relationship, meaning the patent remained mine even if I was fired. I opened a new tab, logged into the patent verification system, entered the case number, completed two-factor authentication, and waited a few seconds. The line on the screen appeared, calm and heavy as a verdict. License authorization, owner, Ilaris Biosystems Inc., not Neurotech, not Daniel. Me. I looked at that line for a long time. No smile, no sigh of relief, only clarity. Like when the last light goes out and you stop seeing darkness and start seeing the edge. Daniel did not know this. The board did not know. Their legal team did not know, because I had drafted the final contract with a reversion upon ethical conflict clause, written in language too deft to raise suspicion. Someday, they might discover it, but not today, and certainly not before their big reveal next week, when they would announce Neural Recode to the world. I took a sip of wine. My heart kept a steady tempo, as if tapping out a score I had composed long ago and was only now beginning to play. That night, I did not sleep, not from worry, but because I started to redraw the map, not of the project, but of strategy. I penciled a list by hand: assets I control, the patent, the original designs, the core algorithm, media front, untouched, potential ally, Maya Chen, an AI engineer sidelined by Daniel for not following the new business direction. Enemy, Daniel Cross, but also the system that installed him. I underlined one line: reclaim the soul of the system, not through noise, through inevitability. Dawn approached. I opened the window. Cold air came in with the smell of rain and old streets. A delivery truck idled below. The driver yawned. No one knew that in a third-floor apartment, a woman quietly removed from the game was rewriting the rules. I placed my hand on the table where the first light of day had landed, not in prayer, but to remind myself. When they close a door on you, do not beat on it. Rewrite the blueprint for the whole building. 2 days before the launch, I felt something shift, a strange heaviness in the air, like the wind changing before a storm. But I didn't think it would break this fast. Neurotech had been preparing for months. The grand unveiling of Neural Recode 2.0 before investors, medical authorities, and the press was staged as a triumph. The ballroom in downtown San Francisco glowed under perfect lighting, massive LED screens looping serene graphics, and the slogan, "Technology that changes the world." Every detail was polished, sterile, magnificent. I stayed in my apartment, eyes fixed on the monitor. The words on the screen hadn't changed. License authorization, owner, Ilaris Biosystems. It felt like watching a countdown tick towards something inevitable. The event began. The host walked on stage, applause thundered, lights flared. Daniel stepped forward to cheers, suit immaculate, smile rehearsed. Today, he began, we're not just introducing a new technology, we're unveiling the future. The first slide appeared in bold blue: Neural Recode 2.0, Healing Beyond Limits. Everything went exactly as planned, until the engineer in charge of the live demo hit enter. The screen flickered, then went blank. No data, no model, just one line: license authorization expired. A ripple of silence swept through the crowd. Daniel froze for half a second, his confidence faltering. The engineer tried again. Nothing. The words "unauthorized access" blinked in red. Murmurs spread. Someone in the audience whispered loudly. Others craned their necks toward the screen. Daniel raised his hand. "Please, everyone, stay calm. We'll have it back up shortly." But his voice was drowned out by the hum of confusion. Camera lights swung toward the investors. Faces tightened, phones lifted, notifications began flooding the feeds. Neurotech demo fails live. Patent dispute suspected. The stock ticker dropped 7% by noon. News outlets cut into regular programming. Headlines went up in real time. Neurotech launch collapses mid-demo. Patent registered under Ilaris Biosystems, not Neurotech. Daniel returned to the mic, trying to steady his tone. "We're reviewing a technical issue. Please remain patient." But his eyes darted to the lower corner of the stage monitor, where a small message still glowed: license expired by owner. A board member leaned in and whispered, "It lists Ilaris Biosystems as owner." The entire hall froze. Daniel couldn't look away, couldn't deny it. The mask slipped. The certainty that had once filled his voice was gone. Chaos followed. PR staff rushed the stage, blocking cameras. Photographers shouted questions. Investors stood and demanded answers. Daniel stood in the middle of the storm, his composure cracking under the weight of disbelief. From my screen, I watched it unfold, every second of the collapse, every flicker of panic. My quiet months of preparation, my legal framework, my clause, they had all detonated at once in front of hundreds of witnesses. No shouting, no spectacle, just the stillness of realization, the sound of power leaving a room. Within an hour, Neurotech's PR team launched emergency statements, blaming a licensing synchronization error. But social media had already buried them. The hashtags burned through every feed: Neurotech fail, #patent battle. Stock value plunged further. Deals froze. Partners hesitated. Daniel remained on stage, vest still buttoned but tie undone, eyes hollow. A PR manager touched his shoulder, whispered something, and guided him off stage. I closed the live stream. The screen went black, leaving only a faint blue reflection across my face. I wasn't happy, not triumphant. What I felt was something colder, irreversible. Neurotech had collapsed under its own illusion of control. Daniel had lost the one thing he built his image on: certainty. I looked down at my hands. My index finger trembled, not from fear, but from the pulse of that shifting power. In my mind, one phrase echoed: 14 days. The first detonation had happened. From here on, Neurotech would never be the same. That night, I didn't sleep. The apartment was silent, only the sound of wind slipping through the window frame and the rhythm of my own breathing. In front of me, the laptop screen still glowed, the word offline blinking every few minutes, like a reminder that every time I'd ever had to Neurotech had been severed. I opened my inbox. No new messages, no replies from the company email, no word from anyone who used to be a colleague. A message came in from Maya Chen. They can't prove anything. I kept a copy of the original contract. Meet me tomorrow morning. My pulse quickened. I typed back fast. Good. Send a secure location. No GPS tag. I set the laptop down and sat still in the dark. Outside, the city moved as always, its warm yellow lights in sharp contrast to the cold inside my chest. The past flashed before me. Lila, the promise, the reversion clause, all of it surfacing again, like a beam of light in the dark. The next morning, I went to a small cafe by the bay, the one Maya used to escape the noise of work. She was already there when I walked in, eyes alert, face tired but determined. On the table sat her open laptop and a stack of documents. I took a seat. She nodded. What did he do? She asked before I could speak. I checked last night. Someone accessed the contract remotely. The IP traces back to Washington, D.C., near the Defense Contract Office. A chill went through me. If that was true, the military deal Daniel had been chasing might be his biggest card. That evidence is enough if we go public, I said, my voice low, hard as steel. But I need internal emails, board minutes, things only he and his circle would know. Maya's mouth curved slightly, a flicker of pride in her eyes. I was head of the AI team. I know the pathways. I've got encrypted emails, but they need decoding or a backup copy. We sat in silence, speaking in low voices as we built a plan. I told her about the reversion clause, about Alaris Biosystems, the company I had built quietly to hold the legal rights. Maya nodded, her gaze sharpening. He won't expect me to know the internal systems. I've been in places he thought no one could reach. The plan took shape in that dim light. Reveal the true ownership. Explain internal proof if Daniel strikes again. Control the narrative. Turn their collapse into a story I direct. Wait for the moment when disclosure can't be denied. Just then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. The voice of a Neurotech PR officer came through. Dr. Rivers, we'd like to invite you to an urgent meeting to revisit project collaboration. We hope for a constructive dialogue. I stayed silent for a beat, weighing the words. It could be a trap, or a sign they still believed I mattered. I replied evenly, I'll consider it. Send the official invite by email. I hung up. Maya looked at me, cautious. What are you going to do? I met her eyes. I'm not going back. They're coming to me to keep the technology. I'll sell control, but I won't give it back. She tilted her head, then nodded slowly. They'll fight with everything they've got. You'll need the media and evidence they can't refute. We parted ways. She headed toward the city center. I walked toward the bay. The night still stretched long, but something inside me had changed. Not quite endurance anymore, but the return of control. On the drive home, I thought of Daniel. Was he awake? Did he realize power had already shifted out of his hands? No. To the world outside, the failed demo was still just a technical glitch, not a revelation of reversed ownership. That night, I stood by the window, looking out at the city of 1,000 lights. A quiet vow stirred inside me. I was done hiding. Every second that passed was strategy coming to life. Tomorrow, I would begin the counterstrike. Quiet, precise. I would publish ownership documents, evidence, and contracts. The more people who saw the truth, the fewer chances they'd have to bury it. I rested my hand on the window ledge, breathing in deeply, exhaling slowly. The city stretched silent beneath me. I wasn't the one cast out. I was the one rewriting the game. In my head, the number repeated 14 days. The war officially began tonight. I arrived at a quiet cafe in the financial district the next morning, where the early sunlight streamed through the tall windows and broke into thin ribbons across the wooden floor. Maya was already there, laptop open, papers spread across the table. She looked up at me, her eyes sharp. "Are you ready?" I nodded without a word. Her screen glowed with the internal documents she had extracted overnight. Emails between the board and Daniel discussing ownership adjustments in the event of a strategic conflict, audio recordings from private meetings she had accidentally captured, and internal reports proving they had restricted access to the system weeks before the demo failure. Each line on the screen appeared like a crack, spreading through the power structure Daniel thought he had sealed. "He trusts his control too much," Maya said quietly. "But ownership isn't like a server. There's always a backdoor, and he missed it." I said nothing, just stared at the data. My mind turned through the questions: how to go public without being branded a traitor, how to make the world believe the law over the word of a man in power. We built the plan together. First, send a summary of the contract and supporting evidence to several reputable science journals, emphasizing the reversion clause and the fact that the patent was filed under Ilaris Biosystems long before the fallout. Then, once the verification process was complete, allow journalists to quote the original contract and internal emails publicly, irrefutable, transparent. Finally, stage a live stream, not from Neurotech, but from me. I would declare ownership and set conditions for future collaboration. The technology must be partially open to public medical institutions, never locked away as a private commodity. Maya closed her laptop and looked at me. "You want me to handle encryption and distribution with no trace? And you'll prepare the statement?" I nodded. I realized I wasn't just the keeper of code. I had to become the voice of it, the one who would stand at the center of the shift. By noon, an email arrived from Neurotech, an invitation to a reconciliation meeting to discuss renewed cooperation. They wanted me back, or at least wanted to contain the information. The message was polite, careful, like a former friend asking for one more conversation. But I knew the trap behind the courtesy. I replied, "I'll attend if the meeting is public, fully recorded with independent legal observers." I also attached a draft of my prepared remarks. If they refused, I could still say I had offered open dialogue, not backroom negotiation. By evening, I was setting up my equipment: camera, mic, backup drives, syncing files with Maya. The live stream would be simple: slow zooms, soft lighting, no effects. Just me, the documents, and the truth appearing line by line. I drafted the opening speech, a brief thank you to the engineers who once worked with me, a quiet mention of my sister Lila, only enough to ground it, not to sound sentimental. Then the shift into logic, evidence, and conditions for cooperation. That night, I slept lightly. Somewhere between waking and dream, I heard the sound of keys tapping and remembered Maya's warning. They'll fight in every way they can. I sat up, eyes open. The laptop's glow cut through the dark. I knew tonight they would either hit our backups or release their counterstatement. I wasn't afraid. I was ready for both. When the apartment went completely dark, I tested the camera one last time. I spoke into the mic, voice low and even. "If you're watching this, it means every door at Neurotech has closed to me. But I still hold control of the technology." The contract appeared on screen. Ilaris Biosystems clearly listed, the signature beneath it, mine. I cut the feed. By morning, tech news headlines were flashing. "Insider leak. Dr. Elena Rivers claims Neural Recode ownership through an external company. The article included the original contract, internal emails, and board correspondence I'd once sent. Maya uploaded redacted emails to scientific forums. Reputable tech outlets began to investigate. The question spread fast. If Neurotech doesn't own Neural Recode, who does? Neurotech struck back immediately. PR issued statements about internal breaches and unauthorized access. They called the reversion clause informal and non binding. Then Daniel appeared in a short video, jaw tense, promising to uncover the truth and protect shareholder interests. But his eyes betrayed the calm he tried to project. Online, the debate caught fire. Hashtags, who owns Neural and hashtag tech ethics trended. People started questioning the idea of neural technology as private property. My quotes spread across timelines. Medical technology should never be a privilege. Some supported me, some doubted, but everyone was watching. Daniel now faced the storm. Investors demanded answers, senior staff grew restless, and partners backed away. The evidence, contracts and emails verified by multiple sources, was undeniable. That night, I stood in my small studio, camera on, ready to speak directly to the world. I was no longer Neurotech's chief architect, but I was the rightful owner of the technology. I began my address. I'm not returning to Neurotech, but I will return this technology to what it was meant to be. I laid out the contract. I explained the reversion clause. And then, clearly, I offered the condition. If Neurotech wanted collaboration, they must open access to public health institutions and accept independent audits. When the stream ended, the screen went black. Outside, the city lights kept blooming across the skyline. But something had shifted. From that night on, Neurotech would no longer stand as the sole symbol of power in neurotechnology. I, Elena Rivers, had stepped into a new arena, and no one could strip that control from me again, not without facing the full light of truth. When night fell, Neurotech was no longer a symbol of power, but the eye of a media storm. I sat in the dark, the cold light from my laptop stretching across my face like a pale ribbon. The original contract and internal emails I'd released flickered on the screen. Outside the glass, the city lights swam through the fog, but the news of ownership had traveled farther than any beam could reach. By morning, every major tech outlet blazed with headlines. Elena Rivers declares ownership of Neural Recode. Original patent filed under Alaris Biosystems, not Neurotech. Daniel Cross faces allegations of copyright breach. The reports carried the documents, emails, and quotes from my live stream. With each update, the world began to understand. The balance of power in technology had shifted. Inside Neurotech, the communications floor became a battlefield. The PR team scrambled to edit posts, cut videos, and draft statements. They accused me of leaking confidential data, hacking systems, and compromising security. They dismissed the reversion clause I had cited, calling it conceptual and non-binding. Daniel appeared in a short video on the homepage, his face pale, voice slow, as if bracing for impact. We will investigate the facts, protect shareholder interests, and ensure transparency, he said. But behind the words was something else, doubt, the hollow echo of lost control. Social media erupted. The hashtags, #WhoOwnsNeural, #TechEthics, and #Elena Rivers flooded every feed. People shared the contract, dissected the emails, and debated every angle. If she's right, we're watching a CEO lose power in silence, one comment read. Support poured in, skepticism too. But no one could look away. The Neurotech board convened an emergency meeting. Daniel entered the room and faced a row of silent executives. Respect had been replaced by scrutiny. Voices murmured across the table. How did ownership slip from our hands without anyone noticing? We were blindfolded. Faces tightened. A few directors exchanged grave looks. The pressure settled on Daniel like a block of concrete. That night, the Neurotech office stood half-lit, empty. Daniel sat alone amid flickering news screens, the city's glow bleeding through the tall glass maze. His assistant entered quietly, laying a folder in front of him, the printed contract and the company's draft rebuttal. He stared at the papers, hands trembling as the sound of incoming messages, PR updates, social notifications, public reactions filled the air like gnawing static. Then the scene shifted, my live stream. I sat before the camera in a small, bare room. The light was soft, but every detail was clear. Behind me, the contract hung in view. In a corner of the screen, the internal emails waited. I placed my hand on the Go Live button. The camera's glow lit my face. I looked straight into the lens, voice calm, steady, unhurried, but firm. I'm not returning to Neurotech to ask for permission. I'm returning to protect the technology I created, so it won't be controlled like a commodity. The original contract, the internal emails, and the reversion clause prove my ownership. If Neurotech wants collaboration, they must open access to public medical institutions and submit to an independent audit. Each word fell into the still air of the broadcast room. When I finished, I didn't smile, didn't bow. The screen dimmed. The reflection of city lights shimmered in the window, thousands of unseen eyes watching the story unfold. I didn't press stop broadcast. I just withdrew my hand, watching the black screen. In the dark, my heartbeat was steady. The city kept glowing, but power no longer lived inside Neurotech. It now belonged to the truth, to the paper trail, to whoever had the courage to bring it into the light, and tonight, that was me. I woke before dawn. The room was still dark, lit only by the pale glow of my laptop. The line on the screen remained clear and steady. Owner, Alaris Biosystems, Inc. I lay there, listening to the city waking up. For most of the world, it was just another morning. But for me, it was a turning point. Over the next few hours, I watched the flood of headlines and tweets spreading like electricity. Shareholders demanded answers. The tech world buzzed with debates. Journalists dissected the contract, the PR statements, my broadcast, every piece of it reflecting shards of a power once thought unbreakable. Daniel and Neurotech had tried to hide the cracks, but from this day on, there was no shadow deep enough for them to disappear into. The board gathered again on the top floor, glass walls overlooking the city. Daniel walked in, face tense, surrounded by silence. The questions came sharp and cold. Why had ownership slipped from the company's hands? Why had the reversion clause triggered without his notice? And most damning of all, how had he lost control of the very empire he claimed to command? His closest allies looked at him with disappointment. Some spoke bluntly. They couldn't stay under a leadership built on secrecy. Deals were being canceled. Partnerships delayed. Investors pulled out. Daniel sat there listening to the stock numbers fall, to reporters calling his name, to a public that no longer believed him. Meanwhile, I sat at my desk, staring at the whiteboard that once outlined Neural Recode's growth plan. I took the marker and erased the words premium market, defense, and profit. In their place, I wrote equitable access, public health, transparency. Most of biotechnology, I thought, shouldn't be locked inside corporate contracts. It should serve the people who need it most. Calls came nonstop. Reporters, media groups, public health institutes. They wanted interviews, commentaries, speeches. I accepted them all. I didn't want to be the mystery behind the story. I told it plainly. I lost my sister because we couldn't afford her treatment. I made a promise that science must be accessible. I was fired for opposing control, and now I was back to do what I should have done long ago. Eventually, Neurotech had no choice but to face me in public. Daniel and I appeared on a televised tech forum, surrounded by independent lawyers, public health experts, and journalists. I wasn't angry. I didn't raise my voice. I said calmly, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to redefine fairness when technology outgrows its price tag. I own Neural Recode, but I'm granting conditional access to public health institutions. If Neurotech wants a partnership, they must accept that condition." Under mounting pressure from shareholders and public scrutiny, the board agreed to the terms. Neurotech could continue using the system, but the ownership license would legally transfer to Alaris Biosystems. They were required to grant subsidized access to public hospitals, submit to independent audits, and publish annual profit reports tied to the technology. Daniel resigned as CEO. The board restructured, adding a new position, Director of Tech Ethics and Transparency. That evening, under the lights of a modest technical auditorium, I stood before the people who once thought I was gone. I looked up at the stage lights, straight into the camera, and spoke steadily. I was once called the one who got fired, the one who stood alone. But today, the technology I built will never again be owned in silence. Neural Recode will heal, not just profit. This isn't my victory. It's the victory of purpose, and I will protect it as my final promise. As the words settled into the room, my eyes caught a familiar figure at the back of the hall, Daniel. He nodded, not as a man defeated, but as someone who had finally faced the truth. No words passed between us, just an understanding that the old order had ended. I stepped off the stage toward the exit. Applause followed, not for a returning leader, but for someone who had kept her word in both shadow and light. I opened the doors and walked out. The lights from the hallway washed over me, not the glow of triumph, but the quiet weight of responsibility. Outside, the city was alive again. I took a long breath, feeling the rhythm of a world still moving. My journey wasn't over. Ownership was just the beginning. Now came stewardship, the duty to make sure this technology lived beyond the limits of contracts. I walked into the night streets of San Francisco, the hum of the city in my chest. Power, I realized, was never about control. True power was using control to serve.